Hello again, friends. Many of you out there are lost, confused, unsure of why Rin was unable to beat Kai while playing Dragruler Phantom in spite of ripping criticals and heals left and right. The answer is very simple. Rin has no clue how to play that deck. Then it dawned on me, what if people keep getting the wrong idea and start playing Dragruler like Rin does? Well, I think it's time for an intervention. This segment is titled Dragruler 101. Dragruler is easily the best Ragey styled card to ever be created. You're probably thinking, Tim, WTF, Ragey? Yes, Dragruler is a Ragey. The objective of the deck is to keep your opponent at 3 damage until you're ready to push for game. This means that you can bypass Infinite Zero Dragon, Chaos Breaker Dragons, Limit Break Effect, all of Omega Glindios, every break ride in the game, all limit breaks in the game, and to top it all off, Judge Bao Revenger is completely nuts. No, really, I thought Bushiroad learned to make everything when this unit hits a Vanguard. Judge Bao Revenger does not need to hit a Vanguard. So you can seriously get those 2 cards from your deck by swinging into a rear guard. Now, the first thing that you need to know about Dragruler is that you don't need critical triggers. This is obvious to most of the card fight veterans out there, but some people legitimately needed to be told this. The second thing you need to understand is that Blaster, Dark Revenger, and Dorant have no place in this deck. All of your counterblasts are reserved for Darkbond Trumpeter, Mordred Phantom, and Dragruler Phantom. Additionally, 4 Rukia and 4 mana are mandatory. Masquerade is the next best thing to Rukia, so it should probably be in there at 3. While there is some leniency on the Grade 1 lineup, and Dorant could be fit in, without Blaster Dark Revenger, he doesn't do anything. And that's it. There really isn't too much else to understand about the deck's composition, but what about the deck's strategy? You attack to get them up to 3 damage. Since you have no critical triggers, you can't ever force them to 4 damage without intentionally attacking their Vanguard. You attack their rear guards with your Vanguard after that. You don't have to rush to get them to 3 damage, it will happen naturally over the course of the game. You don't have to field too many units either, so they have to choose between giving you the limit break or not drive checking. Giving them rear guards to swing their Vanguard into to mitigate your own limit break is not something that you want to do either. After you've saved up as many Trumpeters and manas as the game will allow you, you should field a Rukia in one row and play your manas and Dark Bonds in the other row. This process will give your Rukia 3000 power for each grade 1 or less unit called this way. You will also want to reserve your counterblast for Dragruler over Darkbond Trumpeter in the event that your opponent hits a heal trigger on the turn you're pushing in. You can mitigate this completely by waiting to go all in at 5 damage though. Now, you might be thinking, Tim, this is great and all, but what if my opponent 6 damage heals? Well, then you weep bitter tears of defeat, like most decks do when this happens. But what if they have 4 null guards in hand? Then your opponent likely has very few fielded units to your full field, and they definitely don't have a hand anymore. But what if I don't have Rukia? Now this is where we get into the consistency discussion. Now, Rukia is pretty much the entire crux of the strategy, but if you hit the break ride and miss Rukia, you can just use the break ride to go search for Rukia on the turn that you're pushing to win. This entire tactic works if you either break ride or draw into Rukia. The only card that is mandatory for you to have in your hand for this tactic to work is Dragruler Phantom. That's the only card that you legitimately have to draw into. You can search out Rukia with Mordred Phantom, or if you don't have Mordred Phantom, if you draw into Rukia, you can still do this tactic. With these absolutely enormous rows, stand triggers to make Rukia stand again with its ridiculous power, and your opponent not being able to guard your units without at least 3 perfect guards, you are typically going to win any turn that you push with this. And any turn that you don't win when you push with this, your opponent is going to be severely crippled for the rest of the match. Now, in closing, you do have 2 tech choices for this deck. You can go with either of these 2 grade 1s, either Blackwing Swordbreaker, which allows you to Soul Blast 1 to draw a card when it gets called from the deck, or Shadow Lancer, which allows you to discard a grade 3 Shadow Paladin to search for a Mordred Phantom. Shadow Lancer has a bigger advantage in this deck because it can be fished out with mana. I have about 3 reasons why I picked Shadow Lancer over Blackwing Swordbreaker. The first reason is, of course, that Shadow Lancer has Revenger in the name. It can be sacked with Dragruler Phantom. The second reason is that it allows me to thin my deck directly of grade 3s. The third reason is that mana can fish him out. That's really, really big for this deck. Blackwing Swordbreaker is still a very strong card. You can use Judge Bao Revenger to get 2 of them out, and you can double draw off of that. That's really great. But you also have to consider that you really want to have as many stands in your deck as possible, and with 12 stands in your deck, if you draw a random card, you're very likely to hit a stand.